Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be setting expectations for the Buffalo Bills defense in 2024. Where do we need this defense to rank? What kind of sack production do we expect? What bar is too high for a Matt Milano, Terrel Bernard duo? What kind of growing pains can we expect from whomever our new safety duo is? All of those questions we will attempt to answer and more. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. Dave, we are gearing up towards our sort of summer hiatus. We got about 3 more weeks here, and that means we get to do some really fun shows over the next couple of weeks. And this week, we start by setting our 2024 expectations for the Buffalo Bills defense.
Yeah, and as you kind of teased in the preview there, some turnover on this side of the ball. We put it in the show description, right? No Jordan Poyer, no Micah Hyde, at least as of right now. No Leonard Floyd, Matt Milano back from injury. So there's a lot of sort of, yes, net losses, but some gains back as well, some draft picks as well, and guys coming back from injury. So how does it all shake out? Where do we expect this defense to be this year?
Let's just smack ourselves right over the head to start the show here. Let's go big picture. Where do you think the Buffalo Bills need to finish the 2024 season on defense? And let's use DVOA, since that takes, our competition into account as well. Where do you think the Buffalo Bills 2024 defense needs to finish 1 through 32 in order to be considered successful?
Yeah, I mean, so doing prep for this show, obviously took a quick look back at the DVOA from last year's team, 12th in overall DVOA for that defense last year. And it at times felt much worse than that, if we're being honest, right? With the way that the Bills sort of like seemingly gave up drives at the ends of games, even though their points per game allowed total was still 4th best in the league. And DVOA obviously accounts for that, opponents and the like. 12th was their finish last year. I think if they're hovering around that top 10, inside the top 10, would be a really strong year from this defense, especially given the schedule. We have to play the likes of Pat Mahomes again this year. We obviously have already gone at length discussing about the schedule, 49ers on the schedule as well. Some tough opponents, on top of the fact that we do expect the division quarterbacks as well to be better this year with May and Rodgers and obviously Tua. So you got to kind of put it in context with, yes, where they were last year, 12th, a lot of injuries. This year, the schedule looks fairly daunting. I say a top 10 finish in DVOA standards would be a pretty impressive finish for this defense.
Yeah, I think with multiple new starters and people coming off of injuries, it's probably going to be a slow start from this defense as they go through some growing pains and some transition pains. So realistically, I can see them probably ending the year somewhere in the range they finished last year, because last year was probably a down year for them because of injuries. This year might be a down year for them because of early growing pains. So somewhere in that 12 to 15 range is where I think they'll probably realistically finish. But
yeah, that's fair.
I think, right, the caveat to this question is, in order to be successful, right? Not where we think they're going to finish, but where we think they're going to finish in order to get over this hump that we want to get over. And I think that the Buffalo Bills are going to need a top 10 DVOA defense down the stretch. So like the last 10 games of the regular season into the postseason, I think that this defense, whatever they are doing, whatever they are changing stylistically, and it kind of, I don't know, getting younger, getting faster, maybe that makes them better. Maybe the inexperience makes them worse. I don't know, but it's all got to come together in the back half of that season. And I think if the Buffalo Bills want to get where they want to go, especially with an adjusting offense as well, there's a lot of transition, there's a lot of turnover on this entirety of this roster. I think they probably got to be a top 10 unit down the stretch in order to accomplish what we ultimately want the Buffalo Bills to accomplish.
Yeah, they do, and they obviously need to be a bit better in the postseason, as we've talked about
Mhm.
a couple of times, right? And you start to kind of go beyond DVOA, and we're still talking big picture here. This is a team I mentioned allowed 18.3 points per game in the regular season last year on defense, which was fourth best in the league. But again, at times
Mhm.
it didn't feel like that because you start to dive into it a little bit closer. Their third down defense, they allowed almost 40% conversion rate, which was bottom half of the NFL. In their fourth down defense, they allowed over a 50% conversion rate, which was also bottom half of the NFL. They were fairly disciplined on defense as a unit last year, seventh fewest penalty yards on defense as a team. And we'll talk about the turnovers here in a sec. Obviously, the third most takeaways in the NFL, but their differential only +2. So, yeah, I think big picture, there's a lot of things that could carry over into 2024 that were positives from last year. And obviously, getting guys back are going to be big.
Mhm.
But there's still going to be some interesting storylines as we kind of head into the season, like Bobby Babich as the defensive coordinator, Matt Milano back from injury, Cole Bishop, the second round pick as a rookie. It's going to take a while. I think you're right. And I think if
Mhm.
the team, if we see improvement week to week and down the stretch, I think that's going to be the most important thing.
JG7785 comes in and says, if we get 80% of Von Miller of old, I think the defense will be better than the one in 2023 by the second half of the year. And that sort of brings me to the next talking point here, Dave. I want to sort of, run something by you here. If you had to pick one player to have a rebound year from last season, maybe it's an injury that player sustained and they were out for the season, or whether it was an off year because they were coming back from an injury, whatever it is, who is one player on this Bills defense that's going to need to have a rebound year for us to get where we need to be defensively?
Well, I think in how I think of a rebound, right, is a player
Mhm.
that played a good portion of the season, the prior season, and maybe didn't perform up to standard. So I'm going to kind of leave Matt Milano off
Yeah.
of this conversation when I talk about rebound because, like, he's coming back from injury. He's going to have to rebound from his injury, obviously, and come back. But, like,
Mhm.
I don't think you can say, like, oh, he was playing badly before the injury. So I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go with Von Miller. I think that's the obvious choice. Um, came back several games into the season, no sacks at all last year, had some okay reps, I guess is the silver lining you
Mhm.
could talk about for Von Miller, but really made no meaningful impact on the field. And let's just say what it is. He
Yeah.
didn't really make a meaningful impact on the field on the downs in the reps that he did play. It has to be Von Miller in my mind. You need to replace what you had from Leonard Floyd
Yep.
last year, at least somewhat, right?
Mhm.
And Leonard Floyd trailed off at the end of
Yeah.
last year. So to me, with the contract,
Mhm.
with the offseason storylines around the stuff going on with him legally and the fact that he took a pay cut and all these things to kind of like incentivize his contract now. It kind of starts and ends with Von Miller for me.
Yeah, looking at Leonard Floyd's statistics from 2023, this is what you're trying to replace if you're the Buffalo Bills. 41 pressures, 12 sacks, 7 hits, 22 hurries. So you might have to sort of replace that in the aggregate, the old Moneyball expression. And Von Miller is going to be a part of that. And then probably Dwayne Smoot is going to be the other part of that equation. So I'm with you. I had two names on my list here, players who have to rebound. One was injury related, Matt Milano. But if we're
Yep.
taking that off the cards, I mean, it's got to be Von Miller. You are paying him so much money. You are just stuck with that contract. He needs to, now 2 years removed from that ACL surgery, he needs to fill that Leonard Floyd vacuum. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. How about one player who has to take their game to the next level for our
Hmm.
defense to get where it needs to be? Who's one player you would pick here?
Wow, taking their game to the next level. That is a good question. I mean, obviously, I don't think you can consider guys like Terrel Bernard or Christian Benford
Mhm.
because those guys kind of, I think, showed what they could
Well, I
be.
I think you could, right? Like Terrell Bernard, you were a fringe all pro. Well, you need to cement yourself as an all pro. Christian Benford,
Yeah,
you've been a solid corner, be a top 15 corner. Like I think you could if you
you
wanted
could.
to put one of these
I
players in
think
the
you
spotlight.
I think you could make more of an argument for Benford than Bernard
Mhm.
because I think the room for Bernard to get even better than he was last year. I mean, how can you get better than what Bernard was last year. I think the All-Pro thing, like, to me, was just a lack of recognition and a snub for him. And then obviously got the injury he faced was at the worst time of the year during the playoffs. Kaiir Elam's a good choice. I think Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa, someone in the AJ Epinesa was ascending last year. Greg Rousseau, obviously, they picked up the 5th-year option on him for next year. But I think, can Rousseau become more of a complete player in the sense, can he do more than getting cleanup sacks? Can he add a little bit of pass rush pop to that amazing length and sort of ability to play the run that we know he has, right? And you talk about a guy who had 5 sacks last year. Can he build on that? And if you can get, an improvement from Von Miller, a big jump or a jump from Greg Rousseau, and you can still see an ascending player in AJ Epinesa, this Bills defensive line has potential, but there are still a lot of question marks. I think Rousseau is a good option.
Yeah, the top of my list was Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa. Rousseau, 55 pressures, 6 sacks, 13 hits, and 36 hurries last season. And he played like the entire back half of the season, 3/4 of the schedule on that broken bone in his foot. So coming back fully healthy, if you add to those numbers, right, push those 6 sacks to like 10, maybe push those 55 pressures up into the 60s or the 70s, get, those 13 hits up to 15, 16, 17, get those hurries from 36, maybe to the into the 40s, maybe push 50s, things that you can do if you're fully healthy and have both feet to utilize. If he can do that, that's going to take a lot of pressure off. And that's probably part of replacing Leonard Floyd in the aggregate as well, because if Gregory Rousseau takes his game to the next level, you're not going to need someone like Von Miller or Dwayne Smoot to step up as much, because you have more of a upper echelon player on one side in a Gregory Rousseau. And then Epinesa, who also dealt with an injury late, 29 total pressures, 7 sacks, 4 hits, 18 hurries. And he's probably going to see a massive increase in his snap count this season. So those are the 2 guys that I really expect to hit their ceiling and take their games to the next level. And if they do so, that's going to fill a huge vacuum for this Buffalo Bills defense.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's just, we knew last year, right, that Von Miller was coming back from the injury. So we kind of already knew that like he wasn't going to contribute at the beginning of the season. There was a lot of talk of like, can he be back for week 1? Can he not? We kind of just played, assumed the safe thing that he wasn't, right? But ultimately they had Leonard Floyd, they had AJ Epinesa, they had Greg Rousseau. And Leonard Floyd, I think, played above expectation. So there isn't that guy maybe now on the roster. Smoot, maybe Javon Solomon gets some run as a pass rusher. But yeah, there's some pressure on this group this year.
The leadership vacuum and sort of the cornerstone player vacuum. That's sort of what I want to address next. I don't want to put Gregory Rousseau into this conversation yet, because I think he still needs to take that leap that we talked about. I don't want to put a guy like Christian Benford into this conversation, because I think he still needs to take a leap to show he's more than just a solid starter. I don't want to put a guy like Cole Bishop, who's a 2nd-round pick and a rookie, into this conversation. But there are 4 players that I want to hone in on as sort of the backbone and the cornerstone, the spine of this defense. Ed Oliver at 3-tech, Terrel Bernard and Matt Milano at linebacker, and Teron Johnson, the all-pro nickel corner. All 4 of these guys are capable of being all-pro players. And I think if all 4 of these guys are all-pro players in 2024, Oliver, Bernard, Milano, and Johnson, I think this unit has a chance, if those guys can all stay healthy and they can all hit their peak and they can all have career years, I think this defense has a chance to be a top 5 unit. But all 4 of those guys need to be healthy, and all 4 of those guys need to be playing at a level they are capable of, that all-pro potential.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Like, they're not all going to be all pros, even if they all play lights out, right? It's just mathematically, it won't happen. Now, could one or 2 of them be? Yes, of course. And I think those 4, you hit the nail on the head. I think those 4 plus the glue guy of Daquan Jones in the middle, not to say that he's necessarily going to be an all-pro at his age and sort of just for what he does, but he was playing at that caliber before the injury last year as well. So if you want to kind of round out that group with a 5th guy, he could be that guy. But you're right. There are some studs at each level of this defense. And if they can put it all together, if they can like just get a little bit better luck with the injuries, because it was like 2022 was the opposite of what happened in 2023, right? 2022 they got pretty lucky with injuries, and in 2023 it was just like total opposite, right? It just everyone got hurt. So and some guys at the wrong time, right? So I'm with you on that. I think those are 4 really good names to have as sort of cornerstone type players.
Walter S. comes in and says, "This is by far the least optimistic I've felt about the defense. Too much hoping guys take steps rather than expecting it for my liking." I agree with this to an extent, but I think there's also a higher maybe ceiling this year than years past, because this aging team, don't get me wrong, I would love to rewind the clock and bring 2018, 2019 Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde back, but that's not the Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde that we had in 2023. So to me, it's kind of exciting. There are some real wild cards. There are some guys who could really take their games to the next level, have a ceiling to take their games to the next level, or young players who haven't had an opportunity yet, right? Rookies like Cole Bishop. Then there are other guys like Christian Benford, guys like Gregory Rousseau, guys like AJ Epinesa. There's a real opportunity, a real chance. You can throw Taylor Rapp in there as well for some players, some young, youthful players to really step up and maybe take this defense to a level we've never seen before, because that defense had sort of aged out of its, highest capacity.
Yeah, and I mean, the ceiling of this defense in those 2018, 2019 years was based on the fundamentals of doing like your 111th and just kind of being very sound, a sound unit, and statistically, like the advanced metrics like DVOA and even the raw statistics around points per game, like it was very favorable to the Bills, right, under the Leslie Frazier regime, but it wasn't maybe exciting to watch. And so I think we have to kind of like separate those things, because like there may be some lumps that this defense goes through, like you said at the beginning of the season. But I do agree with you. I do think the ceiling is higher, and it may not necessarily be like, it may not happen in 2024. It could be a 2025 situation where the ceiling maybe is met. But
Yeah.
I expect Cole Bishop and some of these young guys to get a lot of playing time this year, and it is exciting, right? Because at the end of the day, like, to me, you have a little bit more wiggle room on defense and sort of what you have to do, because in theory, with Josh Allen on the other side of the ball, like, you don't have to be perfect on defense every week. And we saw that last year, right? With the fact that they faced these injuries and they were still in these games. And yes, there were some late game issues, but maybe that's part of the things that can be fixed this year. And that's what we hope can be fixed this year.
All right. Before we get into each position group and our expectations for each position group specifically, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, Dave, let's start our conversation this evening specific to position groups with the defensive line. Joe DeRosa comes in and says the D-line is returning every starter except Floyd, whose production dipped in the second half. We're going to get to that in a moment. And Walter S. also comes in and says, my concerns are mostly regarding the D-line pass rush when I say that, when he says he has lower expectations. I think I have a take that might lessen some of that concern for you, Walter, and we're going to get to that. But first, I want to start with the question mark on the D-line. Rousseau is probably ingrained as your left end. You have Ed Oliver at the 3 tech. You have Daquan Jones at the 1 tech. The real question, and I know part of this is sort of watered down by the fact that the Buffalo Bills do utilize a rotation, but who's the starter opposite Gregory Rousseau? Who's the bookend? Who is the right end for the Buffalo Bills defense this year? Is it going to be Von Miller? Is it going to be Dwayne Smoot? Or is it going to be AJ Epinesa? What do you think about who starts at right end for the Buffalo Bills this year?
For me, it's AJ Epinesa right now. Should be the starter, in my opinion. The Bills brought him back on that pretty decent contract. He maybe could have got more money elsewhere, but the Bills brought him back, I think, knowing that they had to have some kind of insurance against Von Miller. Yes, Dwayne Smoot, you signed with all those void years, and he's probably going to be on the team. But to me, AJ Epinesa has to be the first crack at the right end. That's where he played most of his snaps last year. If you look at PFF snap breakdown, most of his snaps that he played were at the right end. And it again allows you to kind of be in a situation where, look, Von Miller, we don't know what we're going to get from him. In his early years in his career, he was a good run defender. He was the complete player. But right now, you're just hoping to get pass rush pop out of Von Miller. I don't think you really want to trust Von Miller on early downs. So to me, I slide AJ Epinesa in there and have Von Miller be your kind of third down package for pass rush, assuming he's got some pop left. So AJ Epinesa is my vote.
Yeah, I'm personally, and we mentioned it at the top of the show, I'm personally buying all the Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa stock that I can. I think these guys are both going to be workhorses for the Buffalo Bills. I think they're going to see a lot of early down work for the Buffalo Bills in 2024. I think they're each sort of coming into their own. They're each reaching their peak at the same time, and I think it's all going to sort of come together in the 2024 season for the two of these guys. So I'm with you with AJ Epinesa. So that gives us Rousseau, Oliver, Jones, and Epinesa left to right. So how is this rotation going to shape out after it? To me, I think on the edge, and we'll skip over the D-line rotation because that's pretty chalk with Oliver, Jones, Johnson, Carter, and then maybe Williams working in. But to me, on the edge, the early down guys I think are going to be Rousseau, Epinesa, and Smoot. And then I think the Buffalo Bills are going to have two sort of like pass rush specialists. One of them is going to be Von Miller, who they're probably going to want to not overdo, especially early in the season. And the other is the rookie 5th round pick, Javon Solomon. I think that he is they're going to probably want to keep him on the roster. They're probably going to want to try to find a niche role for him. And I think on obvious passing downs, you can probably put Javon Solomon onto the football field year one. So the combination of Rousseau, Epinesa, and Smoot early, and those guys can all contribute on later downs, passing downs too. And then the specialist, Von Miller, Javon Solomon, I think that will help the Buffalo Bills somewhat recreate the success they had with the pass rush in 2023.
Yeah, and I love the Javon Solomon pick, right? Because stylistically, he kind of lines up more with what Von Miller does, right? And obviously led the nation in like we know all that. We went through all that. But if you're talking about like a guy that complement the early down guys like Smoot and Epinesa and Rousseau, like Solomon's a nice compliment to have with Von Miller on that back end. And what it allows you to do really is on early downs, you can kind of rotate that right end between Smoot and Epinesa if you want to. I think Epinesa will get first shot, but then you could come up with some type of, packages on third downs where maybe it's Epinesa, Miller, and Solomon, and then not Ed Oliver or something like that on the field to give you your best pass rushers all on the field at the same time. Because in my mind, those are your 4 best pass rushers that you have on the team potentially. Nothing against Greg Rousseau, but I think Epinesa is a better pass rusher than Greg Rousseau right now at this stage. And between him, Oliver led the team in sacks last year. Solomon, who's got that pure sort of pass rushing ability, and Von Miller, that could provide you some interesting options, I think, on the passing down. So I would agree with you.
The Bills finished 4th in the NFL in sacks in 2023 with 54, 6 behind the league leading Ravens. Where would you set the bar for sacks in 2024? If it's 50, that would be an average of 3 sacks a game. If it's 43, that would be an average of 2.5 a game. And 34 would be an average of 2 sacks a game. Which area are we looking at? Are we looking to recreate what we did in 2023? Or maybe are the expectations a little less than? And if so, is it the 43, 2.5 range, or is it the 34, 2 a game range?
Yeah, it's interesting because you start to think about it. Like at 54, they were 4th in the NFL, but where do the teams kind of behind that fall in, and sort of what is the middle range of the NFL last year in sacks? And it was right about 45, right? 45 would have put you right at the middle. 44, 45 would have put you right about middle of the pack in the NFL. And then as you drop into sort of the low 40s and then high 30s, that's where you get into the bottom half of the NFL. Look, I think 54. I don't know. Right now I don't see them getting to 54 again. I don't. But I could see them in that 45 to maybe pushing 50 range.
Yep.
But if I was going to be a betting man right now, I'd put them probably in that 44 to 48 range
Mhm.
sacks, because I still think they can get home. I still think they're going to be able to get, guys like Bernard, who is a known, blitzer, had the 5 sacks or whatever he had
Yeah.
last year. I think Rousseau and Epinesa will get their cleanup sacks from pressure
Mhm.
from Oliver up the middle. Oliver himself had 9.5 last year. He'll get some. Maybe Cole Bishop as a rookie who's really good around the line of scrimmage. Taylor Rapp around the line of scrimmage can kind of like replace some of what the Bills did as well. But their safeties didn't really have a
Mhm.
ton of sacks as a group last year. So maybe there's a little more coming from that group. I'm saying the 44 to 48 range. That's kind of where I'm vibing right now with the team total.
I'll tell you what, at first I was a little cautious and I was going to agree with your take, somewhere in the 45 range. But then I got to thinking, the standard is the standard, the old Mike Tomlin saying, right? And the Buffalo Bills set a standard in 2023. And I think they can, if Rousseau and Epinesa stay healthy, I think that they can meet that standard. I think they can match that standard. Leonard Floyd in 2024 had 41 pressures, 12 sacks, 7 hits, and 22 hurries. That's essentially what you're trying to replace. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, you're trying to replace 41 pressures, 12 sacks, 7 hits, and 22 hurries in the aggregate. Von Miller and Dwayne Smoot are the two guys that I think you're going to want to try to replace those 12 sacks with. That means Von Miller just needs to get you 6 sacks and Dwayne Smoot just needs to get you 6 sacks. And if you think about it, Von Miller, is now going to be almost 2 years removed from his ACL injury. And in 12 games in 2022, he gave you 45 pressures, 8 sacks, 4 hits, 33 hurries. And, what Von Miller has done typically throughout his career, 7 of those 33 hurries came against the Kansas City Chiefs before he got hurt, right? So Von Miller, get me 6 sacks. Then Dwayne Smoot, who the last time he was healthy, right, was the 2022 season. So he's a year removed from his ACL injury. And in that 2022 season, he had 36 pressures, 6 sacks, 6 hits, 24 hurries. The season before, with 10 starts, he had 50 pressures, 7 sacks, 10 hits, 33 hurries. I don't think it's out of this world to expect Von Miller to get you 6 sacks, Dwayne Smoot to get you 6 sacks, each of them to get you 20 pressures. And then all of a sudden you have replaced Leonard Floyd in the aggregate. And everything that Leonard Floyd gave you, you just replaced with the combination of Von Miller and Dwayne Smoot. Not to mention, Leonard Floyd was completely invisible after the bye week last season. Literally after week 11, Leonard Floyd had no sacks, including the postseason. He went AWOL. So it's not that hard to match the second half production of Leonard Floyd. Literally anyone with a pulse could probably do it.
Yeah, and then you start to look at some of the secondary sort of rushers on the team, and you've got, Epinesa had the 6.5 last year.
Yeah.
Rousseau had 5. You expect that they could probably at least replicate that. You did get 6.5 sacks out of Terrel Bernard. If he plays at an all-pro caliber level, maybe he can replicate that. And then you kind of had some Jordan Phillips at 2.5, Daquan Jones at 2.5, and then a bunch of guys with 1. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I love the optimism. I think it's
Yeah.
possible. I do think it's possible, but I'm going a little bit more cautious as I normally do with these types of things, and I'll say 44 to 48 range.
So I don't know if you had a chance to do this exercise because we kind of talked about we kind of didn't. Did you project sack totals for each player in your show notes this week?
I didn't project sack totals for each
Mhm.
player like down to the individual
Mhm.
number, but in my notes I have Von Miller had 0 last year. Can he come close to what Floyd provided?
Yeah.
And then I had, basically saying like, how are they going to replace the sacks they were going to
Yeah.
get from like each position group, I guess, right?
Mhm.
Secondary, linebackers, and defensive line. So I didn't go to each individual
Yeah.
player.
I did a little bit of number crunching and projecting here. And if Gregor Rousseau takes that next leap like we all expect and has a big year, say he gets 12 sacks. AJ Epinesa, he gets more run. He adds a couple extra sacks. He's got 8 sacks. Ed Oliver from the interior contributes 8 sacks. And then Von Miller and Dwayne Smoot give you 6 apiece. If Rousseau can give you 12, Epinesa can give you 8, Oliver 8, Miller and Smoot 6 apiece, that's 40. So you just need 10 from all the rest of your edge rotation, all the rest of your defensive tackles, linebackers, and corners. So I think 50 could be doable with that projection if all of the guys who need to step up in Rousseau, Epinesa, if the guy who has stepped up continues to step up in Ed Oliver, and Miller and Smoot just somewhat regain their form from years past. I think that is your path for the Buffalo Bills reaching 50 sacks in 2024.
And how much should we consider this comment and consideration, considering the schedule, facing better
That's true.
quarterbacks this season than last? And I think for me, I did take that into consideration with sacks, but I would say I more so took it into consideration for interceptions.
Yeah.
But that is a fair point from Tom Slade there.
Let's talk about linebacker expectations now. So moving on to our next position group. Simple question here. Really, it's a simple question, but it's a loaded question. Is it too much to ask for Milano and Bernard to just be healthy all season and all pro caliber players all season for the 2024 Buffalo Bills? Because that's the dream, right?
I mean, it's absolutely the dream, right? It's the same kind of dream we had. I mean, look, it's not all that different than the dream we had when Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano were together, right? Tremaine Edmonds was a Pro Bowler as a Bill, and Matt Milano was an All-Pro. Like, that's pretty damn close to having a couple of All-Pros there. And Tremaine Edmonds had his detractors, and we know that. I feel like now Terrel Bernard has very few detractors in Bills Mafia. I mean, as good as we thought Tremaine Edmonds was, and there's a lot of conversation around him, I don't see anybody. I think it's one of the few players on the team, besides maybe Milano, that people unanimously agree is an absolute stud. And really, the combination of Bernard and Milano has a ceiling, if they play healthy together all year, to be better than anything we had with Edmonds and Milano together. So to me, this is such a key piece of the 2024 success of this defense, is those two guys being healthy together for most of the year, kind of gluing that defense together between, being in that middle sort of, layer of the defense in front of the secondary, behind the defensive line, that glue to keep that defense together. I don't think it's too much to ask. I think it's what we need. I think it's what we need.
'Cause, I mean, you see this pay dividends for teams across the league. Look at San Francisco with Greenlaw and Fred Warner, and the places that those two guys have carried that defense and that franchise. And I think too, especially with two new safeties and a whole bunch of new faces on defense, Matt Milano, Terrel Bernard, and I'll even throw Teron Johnson there because he's almost like the third linebacker as the nickel back. They're the new pre-snap communicators. They're the new vocal leaders. They're the ones filling the voids. They're the ones working to like disguise the coverages. It's going to be those guys. It's no longer Hyde and Poyer. It's Johnson, Bernard, Milano. Those are, to me, the big communicators and sort of the engine and the brains and the mind of this defense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like you mentioned the four cornerstone players earlier, and Bernard was one of them, and obviously Milano was one of them too. It's just like, to me, Milano, he's a stalwart, right? And he's a core player, but I think Bernard is going to bring the leadership element of this. And I think when we talk about Bernard in the sense of like who is actually going to be the team leader of this defense, for years it was kind of the combination of Hyde and Poyer, right? They were the team leaders at that safety spot. Like, both of them were like the vocal leaders of the defense as well, right? Like, Tre White was there, I get that, and Oliver's been here, and Edmonds wasn't necessarily like the most talkative dude, but Hyde and Poyer were those guys. I think Bernard could be that guy for this defense now, as we kind of go into the next version of this defense. And yeah, super cerebral guy, and obviously McDermott trusted him enough last year to just thrust him in to that role. So yeah, totally agree.
And to me, these two guys make or break the 2024 Bills defense. Milano, Bernard, they made and then broke the 2023 Buffalo Bills defense. Them playing well, I think, can help you overcome some of the other question marks that we have on this defense that we're obviously going to talk about over the course of the rest of the show.
They can. And I mean, all you have to do is go back again, and we talk about it all the offseason, is go to that Chiefs game without Bernard, right? I mean, look how
Mhm.
bad that defense played. And the Bills obviously went out and they kind of tried to solidify the depth at linebacker behind those guys to make sure that if something were to happen, that we weren't in such dire straits. But man, you don't want to even think about a scenario with those two guys not being healthy for the full season.
Speaking of health, neither of those guys have really ever been healthy for a full season. What is your confidence level in the depth of the linebacking core this year? We've had this conversation previously. To me, it's pretty high, and I believe you feel the same as well.
I like it. Obviously, Dodson's gone, and he played admirably last year,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there's receipts of us probably not talking so highly of Tyrell Dodson in the past, and I get that. And look, I'll admit he played better than I thought he would, but Dorian Williams is super athletic, got some really valuable reps last year. They've got Deion Jones, who they signed. They've got Morrow, right? So it's like Spectre, like if he could stay healthy, and who knows, like
Mhm.
Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp may even be able to kind of pseudo linebacker in there at times, depending on the need. So my confidence level is definitely high. I have said it on social media in response to probably one of your tweets that I think it's the best
Mhm.
position group top to bottom on the team, and I'll stand behind that.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think if Milano goes down, I think you trust after what the Buffalo Bills did with Terrel Bernard, a third round linebacker. I think you trust the development plan of an athletic freak like Dorian Williams. He struggled to get on the field last year, but it's a complex scheme. It's a complex system. He came from a rather basic one at Tulane. So you got to trust that if Dorian Williams steps on the field in 2024, you're probably going to see a completely different player than you saw in 2023. Morrow, he's an athletic comp to a Terrell Bernard, more a guy who is like Terrell Bernard athletically. Plus, he's got the experience. He's played a bunch of
Mhm.
games. So if he's got to fill in, you got some confidence level there. And then you like the depth behind them as well in Ulofoshio and Balin Spector.
Yeah,
So
didn't even mention Ulu. So yeah,
yeah, I mean, and I believe it was Claude Puy said the kid they drafted, Ulofoshio, essentially here he has essentially played in the Bill system for the last 2 years. He has spoken at length about how the University of Washington, he was watching Milano and Bernard tape, and they were doing a lot of what the Buffalo Bills were doing and mimicking a lot of what the Buffalo Bills were doing. So maybe less of a learning curve for him if he has to step on the field as well. All right, let's move on to the secondary now. We've talked about D-line and we've talked about linebacker expectations. So now let's talk turnovers because it's the front seven that creates the havoc, and it is typically the secondary that cleans it up. The Bills had 30 takeaways in 2023, third in the NFL behind only the Ravens and
Giants.
Giants,
A
who
weird
had
stat of the 2023.
who had 31, so only one more than the Buffalo Bills. 18 of those 30 turnovers to the Buffalo Bills were interceptions. Is it unfair to expect this type of production again in 2024 from the Buffalo Bills defense in terms of takeaways and interceptions?
Yeah, the 18 picks. The Bills really didn't have necessarily a dominant force, right? That was collecting most of that.
Mhm.
Rasul Douglas led the team with 4, and he wasn't even on the team for about half the season. Bernard was second on the team with 3. Epinesa had 2. Like, I mean, you're talking about a possibility that that number could be replicated if guys like
Mhm.
Christian Benford, Kaiir, Elam, Douglas having a full season on the team, and then adding in the things like with Bernard and Milano getting some of that as well. Maybe Cole Bishop, Taylor Rapp, but again, back to Tom's point, you know, the quarterbacks that the Bills are facing this year, I think, are markedly, I won't say markedly, but are look
Mhm.
better, at least from in totality from what they played against last year. So 18 picks. I mean, I'd love to get 18 picks again,
Yeah.
30 takeaways, obviously including the fumbles, but um, I think anywhere in that 15 to 18
Mhm.
pick range would be a really, really strong season from this defense, considering the quarterbacks they're playing against. And the 18 picks was third in the NFL, right?
Mhm.
Or fourth, I think, tied for fourth in the NFL. So, um, and Taron Johnson, I don't think had any interceptions last year. So, like, I mean, there is potential for this team to replicate that again.
Yeah.
Um, and it'll be like for me, I'm going to be really kind of honed in on like Rasul Douglas in a full season, had the 4 picks. Is that his ceiling? Can he do more? More than 4 is quite a lot. And then
Yeah.
can Christian Benford kind of build on the 2 he had last year, maybe be a true sort of ball hawking type of guy like he was at Villanova? With that was well documented as one of his strengths coming out was his ability to play the ball. So, I mean, I could see it, but the quarterbacks are good that they're playing against. So 15 to 18 is kind of what I'm hopeful for.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough. My mindset, my expectation is just get as many turnovers as you can. Like, one of the things that I'm really going to harp on when we do our post game shows this year is I'm really going to be tracking some of the complementary football stats, and the complementary football stats are field position, and turnovers. Like, those are very important. Explosive plays, right? So those are all things that we're going to be, I think, tracking and looking at and analyzing in our post game shows this year. Is who turned the ball over more, who had more explosive plays, who had better field position, who had more time of possession. Those are all things that we're going to be looking at. So I think if you're the goal of the Buffalo Bills is just to get bigger, get faster, try to create as many turnovers as you can, and hopefully that number is pushing 30 again, like it was last season.
Yep.
Who do you think leads the 2024 Buffalo Bills in interceptions?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll say Rasul Douglas. I'll say Douglas because he led the team last year, and that's kind of his game, right? Like he just fits so well schematically what the Bills want to do, and having a full season and an off season with this unit, and because we're going to be talking about this on our next show, contract year players. The guy wants another contract. He wants one more payday. He's 30 years old. He's going to want maybe another 2-year, 3-year contract. So I'm going Rasul Douglas. He's going to lead the team in picks.
I'm going to go a little out of left field here. I think, the Buffalo Bills are going to have wide receiver by committee in 2024. I think they're going to have interceptions by committee in 2024. I think the wealth is going to be spread throughout the defense. My hot take is Terrel Bernard leads the 2024 Bills in interceptions.
Oh,
I don't think it'll be a high number. I think it'll be like 4 or 5. But
he had 3 last
Bernard,
year, right? So he was second on the team.
So I think Terrel Bernard leads the Buffalo Bills in picks this year. I don't have very high expectations for somebody to get to. There was a 33rd team did a post like every team's last player to get like 7 interceptions or something. Thankfully for the Bills, thankfully for the Bills, it wasn't an embarrassing number. It was Tre White in 2019, I think, with 7. But there was one team, I think it was the Colts, who hasn't had a 7 interception corner since like 1994. That's crazy. I'm sure they had safeties in that time, like Bob Sanders and stuff, that I'm sure cleaned up in the interception department. But when I saw that number, I was like scrolling through the years. I'm like, which one's the lowest? Which one's the lowest? I'm like, dang, Colts 1994. Like, that's rough. So
7's a lot, though. That's a lot.
Yeah,
for one guy.
Especially nowadays for a corner. Yeah, especially when you're a good corner, they just stop throwing at you. Like, that's pretty much the business that we are in 2024. What about predicting starters in the secondary here for the Buffalo Bills? I think Benford, Douglas, Taron Johnson, they are chalk. What about the safety? So, like, who starts at safety?
Yeah, I think to start the season, it'll be Edwards and Rapp. But I think as the season wears on, I could see a 3-man rotation between Bishop, Rapp, and Edwards, and them not really have defined starters. Maybe like they'll throw the names up, obviously on the CBS graphic or whoever it is that's like broadcasting the game, and like someone will officially go down in the books as starting. But I think the bigger thing will be to see the snap counts, right, and how those kind of shake out across the games. But I do say right now, early June, it's probably Edwards and Rapp to start, but I think Cole Bishop's going to play quite a bit.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that will just about do it for us this evening, setting our expectations for the 2024 Buffalo Bills defense. Dave, is there anything you want to sort of throw out there before we head out of here?
No, I think Pete's obviously watches us all the time, and he made a very interesting comment around like he doesn't love the CB depth, and he'll believe the safety room when he sees it. I'm very intrigued by the safety room, right? Because it's our first real taste of life after Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. We kind of had like oh, we weren't going to have Jordan Poyer, but then he came back. And then obviously Micah Hyde had the 1 year left on his deal, and now they're both gone. So like, they're both gone, right? Like, this is it. It's Edwards, Rapp, it's Bishop, the rookie. Not really expecting Micah Hyde to come back. Maybe he will later in the season. We don't know. I'm very excited to see what this safety room can be. A lot of pressure on the safeties this year to live up to Hyde and Poyer's reputation from the past several years. So that'll be interesting.
I guess we can throw defense and special teams in here if we want to talk about Tom Slade here comes and says punter controversy. If there are two players, two UDFAs this year that I would predict to make the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster, and I don't like to make those predictions now. I like to wait until we actually see something in training camp. If there were two players, two UDFAs that I would say have the best chance of cracking the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster, one is Ken Lovely as the CB4, the boundary corner. If he could beat out Jamarcus Ingram, I think Ken Lovely maybe has a chance to be a UDFA to make the Buffalo Bills. So that's defense. And then the other is obviously Jake Browning, who was holding for Tyler Bass at OTAs. We just cut Matt Hawk, so now his competition has been cut in half. So if you're really looking at two UDFAs who can make the Bills, Ken Lovely is one, and then obviously Jake Browning, who can also kick and do kickoffs with the new kickoff rule. You're not going to risk Tyler Bass getting hurt, right? If you have a guy like Jake Browning out there taking those shots. So maybe Jake Browning has an outside shot of making the Buffalo Bills team as a UDFA.
Yeah, because no one likes Sam Martin.
But the thing is that Jake Browning, his hang time was not great at San Diego State. So maybe that was a technique thing. Maybe that was a thing he was asked to do. But hang time is kind of important as a punter. And his hang time wasn't great at San Diego State. So,
yeah. And technically, Sam Martin's still under contract through 2025, too. Now, I mean, I know they can cut him fairly easily, but man, that seemed to be like a kind of a foregone conclusion that he was going to be gone, but not gone. So, yeah, we'll see.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back on Thursday. We're going to continue the theme of defense, and we're going to talk about all the contract year players on defense and talk about who might maybe see another contract in 2025 and be a part of the Buffalo Bills future beyond 2025. But other than that, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!